You know, when I was listening to that music and seeing those hands all coming together on the sand, I had somewhat of a vision within my own mind about standing in the light after this lifetime. My own personal teacher and master, not master of me, but master of himself, is Jesus the Christ. And I had a feeling within that vision to stand in his presence and to say, you know, I hope that what I've given in this lifetime has been honoring you, honoring the light of truth. And sometimes people think that my tears are because I'm sad. They're not. My tears are tears of opening my heart and feeling the presence of God and feeling you. Feeling all of our hands in a big circle on the sand, being together, feeling that for all of humanity. And you know, Charles Fillmore within the Christ teachings, because his master teacher was Jesus the Christ also. Even though unity is a faith that honors all faiths, it honors all religions. In its origins, in its beginnings, was the teachings of Christ and continues to be, at least in my heart. So there's two distinctions within the Christ teachings that Charles Fillmore brought out. Two states of consciousness. One is race consciousness, and the other is Christ consciousness. Race consciousness has nothing to do with skin color. It has to do with the agreements that we agree upon within this world that say that's the way truth is, because the senses say it is so. And so we must walk within that line. We must color within the lines of that sense consciousness. But Christ consciousness is what in the teachings, and I would argue within all the teachings of the world, if they don't even call themselves Christian or Christ-oriented, are to live within a vibration, a thought and feeling vibration that has to do with freedom and viewing life from an eternal perspective, that life is an ongoing process. And so the stories and things, illustrations that I'm going to be sharing with you today are very much in line with an intention to focus not so much around sense consciousness, but around Christ consciousness. That Christ consciousness, as Charles Fillmore and his wife Myrtle knew, was our destiny. Christ consciousness is not some singular person's realm or realization. It is that which is ours as our divine inheritance. It is what waits for us underneath the qualifications of the mind. And that's why we work with consciousness within this movement, through prayer, through meditation, through sacred service. We're constantly working with our consciousness so that we may be free in Christ consciousness. to live within the world but be not of it, so that the senses are spiritualized. The senses become spiritualized, so that we live and move and have our being consciously while we're on the planet in Christ consciousness. It is our destiny. It is ours to claim, to choose, to allow, and to accept. This is our destiny. And so I have a few illustrations that I would like to share with you today. One is a story of a father and a son. The father is a very moral man. He's a very religious man. And he teaches his son from a very early age how to toe that line of religiosity, because the father is really dedicated to thinking that this is the way. And so much so that the son, as he grows, he begins to be rebellious against his father. And he leaves home, doesn't come back. And his mother calls one day and says, "Son, your father has passed on. Can you come home and help me sort through his things and help to just support me as I go through this?" And so he returns home. And one night he's in his father's study, sorting through some mementos and different things about his father. And there's a gentle shift within his consciousness. And he hears laughter. And he looks and he sees the spirit form of his father standing there. And he looks fit, and he looks young, and he looks happy. And he said, "Son, we were both wrong." Because he had been, as Martin Luther King said, to the other side. "I have been to the mountaintop, and I have seen a vision where all people are together." Beautiful story of moving from race consciousness to Christ consciousness. Another man that I knew in Cottonwood, Arizona, he had been within a faith for 65 years. And it was a very orthodox, very traditional faith, of which I will not name. But he started to wake up. He started to wake up. And he started to ask questions of the leaders of the faith. And they said, "You're starting to dance on the edge of apostasy. Be careful." But he wouldn't stop. He continued to have this inner awakening, which was the birthing of his own Christ consciousness within him. See, Christ consciousness isn't just about something that happened to someone 2,000 years ago. It's happening to us now, in this very room. Claim it or not. In this very room, in this very moment, the Christ within you sits poised to blossom, to fulfill your heart's desire, to move throughout the inner territory, the holy land of your being, so that you may rise. from the sleep, from the dead that we sometimes slumber through life, and to be awakened. And that is the greatest inspiration of all. To be awake. My greatest and deepest prayer is, God, help me to be an instrument of your peace. To be a point of light for your expression. Apostasy means a defection or abandonment of a religious belief. It's kind of like having a pair of shoes that are too small, that we've grown out of. Our feet spiritually, metaphysically represent our understanding. So when our feet and our understanding grows, it's natural that we would let go of a previous concept of God, concept of self, concept of relationship with God. You and I are poised to blossom. We are poised to claim this and to allow it. There's another story that I would like to share, a personal experience. My wife and I've told this on one other occasion here. My wife and I also in Cottonwood visited a woman in a nursing home. She was near her transition, her death from this life. We were guided to go and sit at bedside with her. And she would be honored that I shared this with you today. Her name was Suze. And she was very in and out of consciousness, but I asked her, Suze, do you know who's here with you? And she said, oh yes, Rev Bruce and Jennifer. And I said, Suze, is there anything that you would like to say about your life experience? And she said, she sat up, very frail, looking at both of us and her eyes kind of darting around. She said, love, 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 so glad I came. So glad I came. And then she flopped back on the bed, and within 5 hours, she was gone from this world. But that says to me, so glad I came, says that there was an existence before this life, and that there will be another life afterwards. So glad I came. So glad I showed up. So glad I learned so many things. So glad I experienced love. That love was the most important aspect of being on the earth. Love, love, love. So glad I came. So the purpose of sharing these ideas on this Sunday or any other Sunday, really, when I get right down to the core of it, is to say that we are all moving from race consciousness to Christ consciousness. That is the core meaning, because when we define ourselves strictly by race consciousness, we are comparing ourselves with others by class, accomplishment, appearance, all formulaic comparisons that create suffering. But if we are living from our heart, we are living within Christ's consciousness, there is no room for any of that, because we are all, like the slide showed earlier, all equal hands in a circle, touching, loving, being with each other. Interesting thing happened this week. I was in conversation with two other people downstairs. And one person was talking. And all of a sudden they paused and they said, "Oh my God, I'm having a deja vu moment. We have already done this very conversation before." And we all stopped. And we went, "Oh my." Life is one holographic situation. How many people in here have had deja vu experiences? I had one when I was in boot camp in the Coast Guard years ago. It was 9 o'clock at night, and I was doing the head count on all of my fellow Coast Guard young guys, making sure that nobody left and ran off. And I remember walking into this office, and I thought, I just stopped in my tracks. I remember I was just 18 years old, and I thought, oh my God, I just had this experience of remembrance that I have done this on some other level before. And this is the fruit of Christ consciousness, where we break free of the linearness of mind, and we come into a consciousness that is all about knowing that we are all part of one whole. And my mind can't get my mind around it so much. But I just have to trust that these things are happening. That Christ consciousness is moving us towards the fulfillment of itself. And we're moving away and out of and letting go of race consciousness. Don Miguel Ruiz, in his book, The Four Agreements, says that a symptom of race consciousness is domestication. Domestication. Of being stuck in the world. So that when we have spiritual experiences, it's about shifting that. Just as the first story about the Father and the Son, there was a shift that took place. And I'd like to share one more story. I had a good friend in my life many, many years ago. And this may sound very strange to you, but it is along the lines of the blossoming of Christ consciousness, and it was in her life. She said, when I was born, I remembered when I was born, and I was outside in the corridor. My consciousness was outside in the corridor of the hospital birthing room, and I could hear my mother giving birth to me, and she was having a really hard time. And my father was outside in the other corridor, and he was cursing me because he thought that I was killing my mother because of the birthing process. But she was that element of consciousness that was witnessing it. And then when the baby was born, she said, I immediately went into the baby. And I was like, wow. Isn't that a wonderful depiction of non-linear kind of thinking? And that we share these things with each other so that we can remember. So that we can remember. And I wanted to share with you a statement by a person who had a near-death experience. Now remember, this is all with an intention to move from race consciousness to Christ consciousness. This person said, "My near-death experience has made me quite sensitive to many more things than my mind understands. It also helped me to be less serious about myself. I have discovered I do not value things as I once did. I befriend people in a different way. I respect their choices to be the people they want to be. The same for my own family. I will guide but not demand. And as for the light, it was then and remains so my encounter with the only true power, the giver of life on both sides of the curtain. After all, I was given a second chance, and I am blessed and cannot ask for more." Isn't that what we're always speaking about? The light, the love. Many people sign off in their emails and in personal notes, light and love, right? Those are the most important aspects of human existence, light and love. And it says in a lot of these near-death experiences that people go and they meet Jesus or Buddha or their family members. And all of that is about relatedness for that soul moving out of the human experience back into spirit. But the main objective or the main outcome is the union with the light. And it is my view, if it works for you, great. But it is my view that that light is the higher self of each of us. It is that actual self that we are, and that we are going and joining back with it. We are eternally linked. So we don't have to wait to have a near-death experience. It's here now, just shrouded. My dear friend who had this experience with her birth told me also that 19 years later, her mother was having a near-death experience. And she stopped breathing. And my friend called the ambulance, and the ambulance came and worked on her for like 10 minutes and said, "I'm sorry, your mother has passed. Would you like us to take her body?" And my friend said, "No, I need to be with my mother for a little while." And so the emergency medical technicians, they left, and they said, call us when you need us to come back. So my friend is sitting at bedside for about 10 minutes. Finally, she has to get up and go to the restroom. And she hears in the bedroom, "Come here, come here." So she goes in. And her mother said, "Help me to sit up." So she did. And she said, "I want you to know something. Don't ever be afraid of dying. It's like taking off your clothes It's as simple as that. You still are alive. Moving from race consciousness to Christ consciousness. These are the elements that create perhaps deep consideration for all of us to move from being governed by our senses only to being governed by our own higher self, to remember who it is that we are as divine spiritual beings. And that's really, at least for me, the essence of the spiritual path. To get it, that we are Christed beings. We already are what we're seeking. All it's required is for us to choose it, to allow it, and to accept it. God bless you. Thank you.